Yesterday's Scopa hearing into corruption at Eskom was a bit of a damp squib. Former CEO Andre de Ruyter refused to name the senior official he alleges is involved in corruption at the power utility. Despite being pressed numerous times by members of parliament, de Ruyter would not budge. Let's discuss this with governance expert Dr. Harlan Cloete. Dr. Cloete, thank you so much for speaking to us on South Africa Tonight. In a recent article, you said that de Ruyter cannot be held solely responsible for failures at Eskom because governance must be a team effort. And none of the 10 CEOs before him could seemingly get it right. You say if there's no common vision, then there's going to be disunity, and that makes perfect sense. But to every South African struggling under the burden of load shedding, it would seem quite simple that the singular vision Eskom should be pursuing should purely be to provide electricity. So in terms of governance, where are we getting it wrong, or where are they getting it wrong? Because they've got a seemingly highly equipped management team, well-educated and highly placed board.
I think. Thank you very much. Good evening to you, and good evening to the viewers. What I said in the article was that that there's always a bit of tension between the board and management. So the role of the board is to appoint a CEO. And so when de Ruyter was appointed, it was a vote of confidence in his abilities and what he could bring to Eskom. But from that very public interview or exit interview on this channel, he was very clear that he could no longer continue because he felt that he did not have the support, firstly, of the board and of the political principles. And like I said, if there's no common vision about where the organization is going in terms of the strategic intent and a clear understanding of what is the role of the board and what is the role of management, you will have these squabbles. It's like the African proverb says, if elephants fight, it's the grass gets hurt. In this instance, it's South Africans that is bearing the brunt of a governance crisis that we have seen over at Eskom that is as a result of the last decade.
We're seeing those governance issues elsewhere. We're going to get to that in a moment. I want to take a step back and look at yesterday's Scopa session. It didn't deliver the kind of answers that South Africans were hoping for. De Ruyter remained tight-lipped about this senior official that is supposedly directly involved in the corruption. And I suppose we can't blame him, if safety issues are a big concern. But what is your sense about how de Ruyter utilized, or in your words, failed to fully interrogate the intelligence report that he used to inform his explosive claims?
Look, de Ruyter is the accounting officer in an organization like that. De Ruyter is the accounting officer. So if I appoint a service provider or I appoint a manager I can delegate that responsibility, but I still remain the accounting officer. So if he relied his information on the information that he received on the reports, I would think that he's interrogated it. And there's the danger of the single narrative. It's two sides. So it's de Ruyter's view on the other side, and all of these allegations have not been tested, for example, in a court. But de Ruyter's public exit interview was very telling. He spoke calmly. He spoke on what he thought that time was the truth, and he relied on the evidence that was presented to him. And so for a man to have such a public exit and to make the allegations that he has made, it says something.
You say he should, in this recent article, you say he should maybe share that evidence because you cannot make these kind of claims without bringing evidence to the table. Otherwise, it is, as you say, a single narrative. But given the volatility of the situation, how would you say he should have handled that?
I think he has lost. I think for de Ruyter, in any relationship, he has lost the confidence. The board appointed him. He had the political backing of the governing party, and he has lost confidence. I think Minister Godhan has at one stage admitted that he was one of the people that de Ruyter spoken to about the crisis in Eskom. what the writer publicly said that it's the inaction. Now, this inaction we have seen in at the SABC, we've seen it at the Tourism Council, we've seen it at other boards. It's almost like a pattern within our governance system, where there is a lack of confidence or a lack of trust between the board and the accounting officer. Again, coming back to what I'm saying, if there's no why, if there's not an understanding of what it is that we're trying to achieve, the job of Eskom is to keep the lights on and to make sure that we plan 10 or 15 years ahead. If that is, if we lose track of that, and start playing political games with the lives of millions of South Africans, this is the net result of that. So the writer has lost the confidence. I think that he no longer trusted his principles. Remember, as the accounting officer, he's appointed by the board. And if the board appoints him, the board is saying to him, we will back you. The board's role is strategy. The role of the accounting officer with his team is to make sure that the strategy is executed. We have a misalignment there. Because in one report that I read today, for example, the chairman of the board had meetings behind the writer's back with staff. Now, that is totally wrong. It's a and when that has happened, you have this crisis. But this pattern is almost synonymous with all government departments, notably, tourism, notably the SABC, and so I can go on and on and on.
But we keep saying that we have these governance issues at SOEs. Do you think it's necessarily any better in the private sector?
I think, we do not, the private sector is not under such public scrutiny as the state-owned enterprises. I read the other day of shareholders that are saying, that CEOs shouldn't get so much in the private sector. But I'm saying public sector institutions and state-owned enterprises are under public scrutiny, and rightfully so. They are there to serve the state. They are there to serve the people. They're there to see that South Africans, that this dream of 94 is achieved. Unfortunately, we have seen that where there's deployment, for example, where we have a competency problem, where people are deployed to board without the necessarily skills competence set, then we have these types of problems. I think this came out in the Zondo Commission. Our Eskom, for example, was looted, and PRASA, etc., where these institutions were looted to ensure self-enrichment instead of making sure that these institutions deliver and work and function to the betterment of society. In this country, we've got the World Bank last year said, and I keep repeating this, the gap between rich and poor. We are now the inequality champions of the world. And so these institutions are supposed to deliver this dream of 94. That dream, I think, is completely lost. People have lost hope and confidence in the ability of the state and in the ability of these enterprises to act ethically and accountability, because that is what King 4 says. The role of the board is to ensure that it provides leadership, strategic leadership, that it is ethical and it is accountable, and it looks at performance and steers the organization in the right direction. We have not seen this, where people get onto boards to enrich themselves, or they start fighting with one another, which is not in the interest of South Africans.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cloete. And I'm sure many South Africans today, as we observe Freedom Day, think about these very points that you've mentioned and feel disheartened that we're failing to achieve the very freedoms that we're supposed to be celebrating today. Thank you very much. That was Dr. Harlan Cloete. Still to come.